the 28th of March 2024. Dana Durnford. I'm also known as the nuclearproctologist.org. And you can call in to the live shows if you so choose. 709, we're in Canada, so it's a 1. 709-589-4406. We have the number on your screen. I hope everybody's having a good day. Except for nuclear industry, of course. Scumbags. And we'll go backwards to last night and Friday night's show. We'll talk about for a minute the new pixelated spot where they're pixelated typically means severe damage at Fukushima. It's a common spent fuel pool, completely pixelated out. Reactor 4, 3, 2, and 1, and severe pixelation around them. When you head north, reactor 5 and 6, right here, reactor 5 is not pixelated, but reactor 6 and the pump house and the stack are pixelated out. But we noticed another section, and there's one of the markers that doesn't exist anymore. But just above that, you can see it's pixelated out. And we're not sure what is going on there. Now, I got some pictures from the current Google. But like these are grainy old pictures from the old ones. So we established last night the markers. So this is one of the markers. And we know that that's up right there. And there's two other markers. We established where they were too. Sorry. And so we got one marker, two marker, three markers, so we oriented. And then there's a curvature in the road right here. And all of this whole area is pixelated out. And we do believe that's the gate. It might even be the main gate section. And so that's highlighted. It's a much bigger area than the main gate. But it appears to be, today anyway, the main gate in that area. So the blue is the area where is pixelated out. That's this whole area. And you can see it extends quite far. It's not just like this little section right here. It's quite a large area. And we don't know what that is. We don't know why that's pixelated out. And obviously they want to hide something. So there was another set of pictures, and you can see in this set that were released in 2021. There was 736 pictures. So there's two sets that draw you right to that spot. And nobody knows why they released those pictures because all the reactors were redacted. And common spent fuel pool, so that makes sense. And reactor 6. But it turns out there's another area that's redacted. And it's quite a ways away from the ocean. And so that's obviously causing a lot of confusion. And if you go to today's pictures of the site, so you see that circle over there, you can see a curve in the road. Here's the same curve in the road. And where that circle in the center of it is this section right here now. This is a big section that they carved out. So it's completely different. So I need the original footage that week or that month, and preferably before that period, right? I'm going to just float around here. Floating around. So that section is right here. That's the center. And so it's basically this whole section right here. Just give me a second. I'll go in and highlight that actually. I'll go into paint because I can actually access paint on this system, believe it or not. Because the system I'm using is a TriCaster. That's just part of this. The whole system itself, you don't want to know how much is invested in that. It's ridiculous. In the hopes of breaking through the matrix and having people being able to comprehend, I'm going to draw blue. I'm going to draw blue. Okay, here we go. Do you believe I got it? Here we go. It should be blue. Okay. So that blue section, let me bring it back up. Because we're talking about nuclear meltdowns, this abnormality. So that section there is that section here. So it's changed dramatically, hasn't it? And then that area where the tanks were to is completely gone now. Or not, the 3 tanks were to, which is below me. Yeah, so that red section is that section on the other side. And so why was common spent fuel pool pixelated? Or why is this area pixelated? This area here pixelated. Or why was reactor 6, the pump house, and the stack, the exhaust stack for the fuel pools, where the hemorrhage radiation into the environment, all pixelated out? It's quite the quagmire. And that section, remember that center section where we said looked like that might be the entrance point? And look at all the buses they got parked there for the homeless and the destitute and the victims of society and the immigrants that don't speak the language. So when you zoom in on it, that's what that part looks like. And I don't know why it looks like that, because if you get a lot of snow and Japan gets a brutal amount of snow, they're going to fill up with snow. So I'm wondering, is that fake? Is that a cover? I don't know. But it's pretty suspect. But I guess not. It's casting a shadow, right? But that's all buses, and that's all administration up in that section, that new section. They built all the administration buildings up here. And so this section, curve of the road, from say right here, all the way up, that section there is all pixelated out originally. And that footage was early, somewhere in the first couple of weeks. I don't have a date because they don't give you a date when you're doing that stuff. But we do know they had a rogue weapons complex going on at that site. And that, if they had a reactor running there, right, to make their for their weapons, because that's very possible, and the Japanese are very sneaky people, right? The Japanese nuclear industry. TEPCO is committed to rebuilding trust in Japan and overseas. So we got a poll tonight. Has TEPCO been established to be a perpetually evil and corrupt? It's going to be pretty hard for someone to vote no on this one. Even if TEPCO was here, they'd vote no. Yes, right? Okay, so let's establish that TEPCO is evil and corrupt. How about that? Can we do that? Oh boy, can we? So here's TEPCO, got all the media pretending they're in the fuel pool of the building, reactor 3. That's definitely grounds for corrupt, isn't it? The food was banned by 55 countries in 14 prefectures, not just Fukushima. And TEPCO is so evil, farmers are growing food, the nutty, insane sponsored farmers are growing food right alongside of 1-ton bags of radiation. There's actually 30 million 1-ton bags of radiation. And the official story is now nothing got out, despite the fact there's 30 million 1-ton bags of radiation. Radiation covered the entire planet. TEPCO is saying nothing got out. So I think that establishes that they're corrupt and evil on top of that. That's just me. I'm just saying, right? I do believe the buildings are completely gone, but officially nothing has gotten out. The whole nuclear industry is evil and corrupt, but because TEPCO is out there claiming that they're going to be out some looking for some respect. Well, they can never earn respect after what they've done. Everybody in that company should probably face life in jail for what they got done, or worse. Well, hanging is legal in Japan, so yeah, they should definitely have them, a lot of them should hang. 1.37 million tons of wastewater, this is not wastewater, stored in tanks. Now remember that story now. The total is 2.2 grams, so only 2.2 grams got out of these buildings. So clearly something's wrong with my eyes. And this is a professor from South Korea, from the prestigious CAS, the esteemed young John Il. He's a professor at the Department of Nuclear and Quantum Engineering. And he said is equal to 3 grams of sugar going into the ocean. And that's evil, and he's not doing it on his own. He's doing it because TEPCO needed somebody evil. And so the tanks, they say, got 2.2 grams. There's 1,000 tanks, and they got a little over 1,000 tanks. They got 2.2 grams. So I'm going to play a video from 2013, and they talk about the tanks. And what they say in 2013 is there's so much contaminant went down through the reactors and into the aquifer below that's what they pumped up and put into the tanks. So the tanks were filled, all full almost, except for a few of them, at this point in August 2013. So by December, the rest of them would have been full.
The Fukushima plant sits smack in the middle of an underground aquifer. Deep beneath the ground, the site is rapidly being overwhelmed by water. Beneath the surface, water flows downhill and into the basement of the damaged reactor buildings. There it is contaminated with high levels of radiation. To stop the groundwater flowing on into the nearby ocean, engineers are building an underground barrier. But that is causing the groundwater level to rapidly rise. It's now so high the water will soon reach the surface. Then it will start flowing overground into the sea. This week, the company that owns Fukushima, TEPCO, made this disturbing admission.
We understand that this water discharge is beyond our control, and we do not think the current situation is good.
Outside experts say it's now clear TEPCO is incapable of handling the cleanup at Fukushima. It's time for the Japanese government to step in. The situation is already beyond what TEPCO can handle, he says. If it were possible to take proper measures, they would have done it already. It's not as if TEPCO is refusing to do what they can. They're doing everything they can, but there are no perfect solutions. Even if the government does step in, it's not clear what it can do. The only other solution is to pump out the contaminated groundwater and put it in storage tanks. But after just 2 years, the site is already jammed with more than 1,000 giant tanks. Most of them are already full up. At least 400 tons of new water pours into the site every day, and it's going to continue for years and years. Fukushima's water crisis has only just begun. Rupert Wingfield Hayes, BBC News in Tokyo.
So Rupert Winfield Hayes is the guy in the top right-hand corner pretending he's in the fuel pool, by the way. And that was a few months later. These are very corrupt people, to say the least. And just for your knowledge, in 2013, and that same month as the video, Mari Yamaguchi says they got 1,000 steel tanks. And the BBC describes them as large. Has TEPCO been established to be perpetually evil and corrupt? I didn't know how else to frame that question, because let's get back to that. So I think we just established pretty darn good TEPCO is corrupt and evil. Not necessarily in that order. TEPCO is committed to destroying humanity and the 8 million species. Transparency, central element of cleanup work at Fukushima nuclear plant. And they show you these useless pictures. Can you say that with more Dana, please? Okay, just hang on. I gotta practice. So when they try to convince you that everything is in the tanks, they're not showing you the pictures, are they? Of reactor. So there's 4 reactors. There's 4 reactors. 4 reactors. Reactor 1, 2, 3, and 4 have lost their entire inventories. And the inventories in each of the buildings was at least 6 million pounds. And it was basically 8 reactor cores at the top of the buildings in what's known as the fuel pools, the common spent fuel pool, which they have to replenish 120,000 liters in each one each day. There's 1,000 fuel pools worldwide. Those fuel pools are full of reactor cores that are still splitting atoms. So those atoms are released in water vapor. And the number is frightening. What are they doing at reactor 1, I wonder? They say they're doing this, but you can't do nothing there. It's 100% meltdown, 100% loss of inventories. This is the north side of reactor 6 and reactor 5 in front of it. You don't really see that picture very often. And that was from this picture here, and that's reactor 6 up right there, right? There's not a single thing about this site that screams good. And so Junichi Matsumoto is Project Management Office, General Manager in Advanced Liquid Processing Systems, Treated Water Management Chief Officer at Tokyo Electric Power Company. So his title is 2 full sentences. So he's allegedly in charge of the ELPS liquid processing system. And so I showed you a video where they filled up all the tanks with unbelievable high-level radioactive water in 2013. So he's a despicable, degenerate scum. That's his picture up there. Let me enlarge it for us, maybe. Hang on, I got it. There he is. There's the degenerate of degenerates right there, look. Evil, Dr. Evil, Mr. Evil himself. Mr. Evil himself. Should we put like a... Let me see if we can put some gangster stuff on him. See what we got in the old pile here. What does he need? He needs another face, does he? Let me try. I'm not sure if that's going to work first, but let's try it. Yeah, let's try that. Just bear with me first 1 second, because Every once in a while, I like to amuse myself. Hang on, I'm pretty good with this stuff. Well, that's not going to work, Dan. Make his eyes bigger. Okay, I got it. Here we go. You ready? A bit smaller, I think, eh? Because I can make them, you know. There we go. That's a bit better. Let's see how that looks. I better watch the volume. Could get a little squirrely. Oh, there you go. That's a good set of eyes for him, isn't it? Let's put that eyes on him. Let me see what we got here. It might take me a minute. I apologize. Just bear with me. I get so little pleasure. Okay, let me cut that. One more try. Right there. So I'm going to cut that. I'm going to get my head out of there. I'm going to record, and I'm going to play that. Bear with me. Okay, right there. Ooh, doggy, I think we're getting places. I'll be finished. Give me 1 minute. Just 1 minute of your time. That's not asking much. He deserves some extra attention, right? Let's give it to him. It might make it back to him one of these days, right? Oh, I got too much stuff there, do I? Oh no, we're there. Oh no, Mr. Dana. Okay. So then over here was... There was that one. Over here must have been this one. And there and that one. Yeah, that one right there. We cut that right there. Pin the tail on the donkey. I apologize to everybody for... It's not what we're looking for. Didn't I chop that off? Yeah, I have no idea what happened. Anyway, I guess we should get on with it. Looks like I lost my opportunity here. We can put pig nose on it, and we'll call it quits. Just bear with me. There's a reason I'm doing this. Hang on. And I'll just move that down and we'll move on. I just want this picture for later. Well, this didn't work out. How could that go wrong? Okay, that's it there. Yeah, that looks about right. We'll just leave it at that. So when I want to use this picture a lot from now on, so that's ready to go. I just apologize to everybody for taking up your valuable time. Taking up your valuable time. Alrighty. And so he's the guy who's claiming that the advanced liquid processing system actually works. It actually has filtered everything. They check for tritium. See that? So people go out in their boats, small boat regularly off Fukushima power station, collect water samples, and they check for tritium. Tritium is most likely the very last thing you want to be checking for, right? Because these are actual meltdowns. And so let's just, because there's no shortcuts, so let's talk about tritium. Let's talk about the ALPS system for a second. Tritium. With nuclear, once you go nuclear, you can never be a human again. You got to be a scumbag the rest of your life. All right, here we go. Yoink. Scrolling up. So in 2014, in April, the ALPS system had yet to work at all. And we know the tanks were filled up in 2013. There was no filtration system. And this is more evidence. In the AREVA system, which is the same as the ALPS system, in August, 3.5 years later, had never worked. They tried groundwater bypass operation, it had little to no effect. They were going to build a fence, of course, it's going to cost $1 billion. And the reality of it was they didn't do it. The ice wall wasn't just not meeting expectations because there's no top and no bottom. It simply doesn't work. It's an ice wall. The reason they built an ice wall because that was considered experimental, so that was covered by the taxpayers instead of TEPCO. And so when you're cutting corners on something so important, every one of them should get the death penalty for this. And they should put a drip in their arm so they don't die too quick. The Siri system, I think I mentioned a couple of times, but there was also the Curion system. And these systems were supposed to filter cesium-137, because that's the big lie for 80 years, is cesium-137. It's a nasty isotope. I mean, it pulses energy 600 feet. But the biggest byproduct is curium isotopes. And curium isotopes need lead shielding 20 times thicker than you did for plutonium. And the Curion system, Siri system, so if you can't just filter cesium-137 or uranium or plutonium or anything like that in a filtration system. Add a nuclear meltdown on top of that. Because the atoms are all the same size. So a water atom, a wood atom, a rock atom, whatever. They're all the exact same size. And so it's impossible to filter out Siri, the cesium-137, which the Siri and the Curion system. The ALPS system, of course, was supposed to filter out all the other isotopes, and it was going to be it's using a MET. Now the problem was the water you're putting through the filter is so lethal. It's so lethal that you can never change the filter. You can never get back in the same room. You can never walk over the hoses and pipes that is bringing the water to the filtration system. Let me explain that quickly. There's no such thing. I don't do things quickly, actually, so don't worry about that statement. So TEPCO released a video of groundwater entering the complex, and when it came through the complex, it came out the other side. It's 2.2 sieverts per liter. 3 sieverts is considered a lethal dose to a human walking boy. 10 sieverts is a guaranteed lethal dose to people quite a ways away of this material, right? And the world acknowledged immediately that Japan had no control. It was impossible. It's a nuclear meltdown. EU Energy Commissioner called Fukushima an apocalypse. Everything is out of control. France says Japan has lost control. The French should leave the country. Swiss embassy evacuates Tokyo fearing radiation. Fukushima is very uncertain. Tokyo's lost almost all control of the events at Fukushima, the energy official. Nuclear report warns apocalyptic scenarios at Fukushima in the weeks ahead. This could one day be considered the start of the ultimate catastrophe of the world and the planet. But it was. Officials unsure what to do next. South Korea, who's now saying it's like 3 grams of sugar getting thrown to the ocean. The previous administration called Japan's handling of Fukushima incompetent. And the Wall Street Journal said 1,000 years from now, contaminated water from Fukushima may be still entering the Pacific Ocean. Well, of course it will, because the radioactive fallout covered the entire planet. It'll never go away now. Diligent monitoring, collaborated by the degenerate International Atomic Energy Agency. They got to go. We can't have a future, and the International Atomic Energy Agency and ERPA and UNSCLEAR and the ICRP, which is all United Nations. We have no hopes of a future with those organizations on our planet. There is no hope for a future. And that includes the World Health Organization, which is all United Nations. And any United Nations is a bad idea. They have no... their entire legacy is predicated upon absolute evil. Since we began gradual releases last summer, so to suggest that nothing got out in the first 12 years, to suggest that nothing got out there, is insanity, right? So so his job is to lie to you and stab you in the back and murder you so he can get a paycheck. It's completely unconscionable. What Pigface is doing, right? Concentrations of tritium. So, like, to suggest that the only thing you got to worry about is tritium. Like, if I'm there at a meeting and they're trying to tell me tritium is the only thing we got to worry about, I'm going to take all their teeth out of their fucking head right on the spot. I am not going to take that from anybody. I don't give a fuck who you are. Come up and tell me that tritium is the only thing that's getting out of these buildings. I'm going to kick the fucking shit out of you right on the spot. And there ain't a fucking jury on the planet that's going to convict me. And everybody else should do the same fucking thing. Remains far below TEPCO's self-imposed. This is a corporation. A corporation is put in charge of destroying your planet. So you can blame them instead of the rightful, like the International Atomic Energy Agency and the nuclear industry. The nuclear industry has no right to show its face for 1 billion years. Suggesting that nothing, they got a 700 becquerels per limit, and that's what they're... And so, like, it doesn't work that way. Or every nuclear plant on the planet would try to hire TEPCO if they could pull that off. It simply doesn't work that way. And a tiny fraction of the recommended 10,000 becquerels per liter limit from the degenerate piece of shit World Health Organization suggests for drinking water. In California, it's 20 becquerels a liter. Like this organization, United Nations, and their subsidies, which is hundreds and hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of them, are the worst thing can happen to a planet. They're completely out of control. They're literally nothing but monsters. They're literally nothing but demons. They're literally nothing but goblins. 10,000 becquerels per liter limit the World Health Organization suggests for drinking water. It's unbelievable that those people would even be mentioned. These strains upon Japan have included misunderstandings and reputational damage. Like, you can't deny the reactors melted down, scumbag. You can't deny you contaminated your entire country, degenerate. Let's challenge that assertion, because the story is so important. I want to give you a bunch of information you can use to bludgeon TEPCO with. And I might just be the boy. The whole story is insane. Oh, let's not forget this freaking doozy from TEPCO. So there's reactor 4 to your left. I need a better picture, though, to tell the story. Hang on. These people are insane. There really isn't any other way to describe money as insane, isn't it? And monsters. It's literally, these are people, they look like people, but they're actually monsters. Excuse me. I'm just, every once in a while I gotta struggle to find a picture, and that's just too bad. Okay, so here's the story anyway. Reactor Building 4, Fukushima Daiichi Nuclear Power Station, installation of support pillars. We get a load of this. This is where they're claiming they're putting support pillars under the fuel pool. So they're claiming they're in reactor 4. Just, I can't even wrap my mind around it. Reactor 4. These people are maniacs, eh? Well, there is no reactor 4. Reactor 4 is completely destroyed. You can't go in this building. Yet they're claiming they went out in the building, and took their time, laid out all their supports, and they brought in like nice, and this is stuff you usually use at malls and that to keep people away from a display, not away from. Like, none of it makes any sense. And this is the actual pictures where they say they're in reactor 4, and they're putting. Now Arnie Gunnarsson tells that story, right? Let's play that clip. It's hard to beat it when they're actually. It's bad enough they got pictures, but when they actually come out and say they're in reactor 4, putting the fuel pool didn't exist right away; it was gone. Don't worry, it'll make sense. Okay. So that's reactor 4. The fuel pool is at the very top of the buildings. They're not putting support under the fuel pool, are they? Let me fix the volume.
Now, the division I ran built nuclear fuel racks for boiling water reactors exactly like Fukushima. And Unit 4 has always been my biggest concern. If you watched our website, on the very first week of the accident, I was saying that if Unit 4 were to catch fire, you'd have to evacuate Tokyo.
This is the one we're looking for. My apologies.
The Unit 4 was damaged twice. It was damaged by all of the earthquakes that occurred, and it was also damaged by a series of explosions over the first week or two of the accident. So the building is structurally weakened. Now, Tokyo Electric's acknowledged that. They went in May and June of last year. This is more than a year ago, and put an enormous number of extra structural supports directly under the fuel pool to keep the bottom of the pool from breaking through.
So he's claiming they went in and put an enormous amount of structural supports under reactor 4. Arnie made the assemblies, or the racks for the assemblies for the fuel pools for 70 identical reactors. There's zero possibility they're in reactor 4 or 1 or 2 or 3. It's zero possibilities. But I thought that was a nice tidbit. I came across that PDF file and I was like, nobody could be that evil to say that. And this was allegedly June the 7th, 2011. So this is, the reactors are still melting down. And they're in the, we're putting structural support, enormous amounts of structural support on our fuel pool. Anyway, hang on. Anyway, obviously they're not in reactor 4, right? The management of the water of Fukushima Daiichi, filtering, storing, and safely discharging it is just one piece of the puzzle. Uranium fuel rods have been cooled in storage pools at the time of the accident, have already been extracted from 2 of the 4 units damaged. 4 units damaged. Does it look like it's damaged to anybody? Does it look like it's destroyed? Uranium fuel rods were being cooled. Work at the other 2 units, 1 and 2, is ongoing. You can't work at unit 1 and 2. Right? Because that's what we're talking about there. Unit 1 and 2. So let's just quick, because we're almost through the story, thank goodness. But I don't care how long it takes, because every time they open their mouths, they're going to lie to you. But the lies are significant lies. They're deadly to all the species. And so they should be challenged, right? You're not working at reactor 1. Like all of them melted down, right? International Atomic Energy Agency informed in March the number 1 reactor core started melting about 50 minutes after cooling stopped. Melted pile of fuel in 3.5 hours. It's impossible to bulk melted fuel is in Unit 1 containment. Up to 1 million sieverts per hour outside of Unit 1. And the full meltdown at all 3 reactors. Well, they don't count reactor 4. So officially, reactor 4 to your right didn't melt down. And remind everybody, got to stick to the subjects, please. The management of water at Fukushima, they're actually filtering, storing, and safely discharging it. And we already debunked that narrative. And two more. Concerns about... So why even mention climate change in that story? Because they still want to promote nuclear, right? Through transparency, diligence, and unwavering commitment to safety, we are working to rebuild that trust every day in Fukushima and beyond. And you got Rafael Grossi went... Rafael Grossi went down to pick up $20 million check on the anniversary. The anniversary. And then went around holding seminars set up by TEPCO, or the Japanese government, I guess, and saying that there's no issues. And thank you very much for $20 million. Have a nice day. And this industry got nobody pushing back, right? If we don't push back, there really isn't anybody pushing back. There's nobody. Investors are shunning nuclear power. Climate conscious investors, like the word climate is all about, the narrative of climate is all about promoting nuclear. That's what climate change is all about. It's strictly to promote nuclear. And we haven't heard from Stephen Young. Usually Stephen's here Sunday night anyway. Now, on Thursday, Stephen, I seen him in comment, he called in, right? And he had done his 3 infusions last week. Now, he's not very healthy as it is. And so he said that didn't go very good for him. Now, he can barely do anything, folks. So when he says it didn't go very good, that's pretty disappointing, right, to hear. And we haven't seen him yesterday or tonight in the comments section. Shapes want me to link to a video. What video? What video are you talking about? Shake. Let me shift. Shapes. This is linked to video. I got no idea what video you're talking about. Link to video. Yes, we haven't heard from Stephen Young. We're quite concerned. I would imagine he's still not feeling good, and I'm assuming he's got to do more infusions this week. So he's done 3 days of infusions that take, I believe he said, 4 hours each. Anyway, we're hoping and praying for him, that's for sure. France could lead the American people down a path towards a nuclear conflict. Does Joe Biden install confidence in anybody? Does anybody out there look at Joe and say, well, I feel good about him? I don't know a single person. This would be introducing combat troops of a NATO country into a theater of war. France is sending 2,000 troops, right? Making them lawful targets under the law of war. There is no law in war, by the way. If France and the Baltic insist on sending troops into Ukraine, it must also be made clear that such actions has no NATO mandate. Well, if NATO countries are going in, if you attack anybody from a NATO country, then you're attacking all NATO countries. NATO's not supposed to exist. It was created for the Soviet Union. So when the Soviet Union collapsed, thanks to NATO, then NATO should have been dissolved too, because now they're a military-industrial complex of 30 militaries. So if you look up NATO, it'll tell you right on the search engine, NATO is 30 militaries. It doesn't say 30 military countries, it's 30 militaries that work together. And that's the worst thing we could ever have done. And they got their own generals, their own admirals, they're like their own little country, these 30 militaries. And they're 100% rogue. Advised of such clarity, France would be leading the American people down a path towards a nuclear conflict, decidedly not in the interest of the American people or of humanity itself. And so when we talk about certain subjects, I'll get no viewers, basically, right? We got 21 concurrent viewers. And that's due to the subjects we're covering tonight, right? TEPCO in particular. And France sending military into Russia, or NATO sending some of their troops. So they're going to censor the living crap. It doesn't mean people are not watching. It just means we're censored. So they spell scientists right for a change. Announces highest nuclear fusion output ever. Listen, these are scam artists. This is one great big Ponzi scheme. You know, the first plus power of fusion was equal to a 9-volt battery. You're heating water up to 300 million degrees, and you're going to tell me you extrapolated, you got enough power, extra power, you get the power back you put in, plus enough to power a 9-volt battery, like you use in your smoke detector. It's one of the craziest things I've ever heard. Till the year after. So the year after, they boiled water at 300 million degree Fahrenheit temperatures, and they said they got enough energy plus energy back to boil 60 liters of water, 60 kettles of water. So the question, of course, is how many kettles of water can you boil at 300 million degree Fahrenheit temperatures? And then suggest that you extrapolated the extra energy to boil 60 liters of water. Like, these are, you know, they come across with these statements as idiots. And they'll spend their entire career working on fusion. If you took those same scientists and solved any issues you got with geothermal, that would have been solved in about 3 weeks. They could have went back to their idiot fusion, their moron fusion, their stupid, useless fusion. Fusion is stupid. It's literally, you got to be stupid to waste time on fusion and the money on the fusion. They got 20 companies now, 20 startups last year. Startups. And they want $1 billion each, and they got it. And they all got their own design. They're going to crack it. The industry is nothing but scum. There really isn't nothing but scumbags in this industry. Any facet of nuclear, that's what we see. Constant scumbags. And they got to contain the energy with the world's biggest magnets. And then if it touches the wall, she blows. And it's like, no, we can shut the power down. You're talking about 300 million degree Fahrenheit temperatures. You can't just shut it down. It's not just going to go from 300 million degrees to 0 degrees in a millimeter of a second. It's just not going to happen. And if it runs away for an extra second, 300 million degrees can do some friggin' damage. Like, if you take 9,000 degree Fahrenheit temperature molten reactor core meltdown, if that hits water expands so much per liter, it's insane. That will crack the earth open. So imagine what 300 million degree temperatures is going to do. And they admit that they don't know if the magnets can control it. Of course they don't know. It's not a stretch in the dark. It's a ludicrous assertion. The world, at least the scientific one is full of morons, inbreeds, completely dysfunctional. Like they're literally the worst people imaginable to spend their career working on a fusion rather than coming up with solutions. It proves, by doing it, it proves they're idiots. Yeah, they got a good education, but they're actually morons. The majority of them can't even tie their own sneakers. Has been on the hunt for the cleanest, most efficient way to fuel our needs for decades. Well, the best way to do it is geothermal, for Christ's sakes. Excuse the language. Geothermal is everywhere. You can drill down anywhere and tap into it. That's the best way to do it. It's perfect. Instead of needing 10,000 people at your plant every day, you do 10. Instead of spending a $270,000 a day on maintenance, you spend nothing on a couple of buckets of grease or something. And you got all these fancy designs, and they got no proof any of it's ever going to work. Zero proof. And you waste all the precious metals and resources and academics and money, the monetary they pour into these idiots' machines. Heating plasma to 100 million degrees Fahrenheit or Celsius. One drawback is that sometimes comes in bursts that damages the confinement walls. Another is the helium, radioactive helium is a byproduct and has to be safely discharged. Well, you can't safely discharge anthropogenic radiation. And look at the money they throw at these idiot machines. And it take 20, 30 years to build it. And this is about an equation, trying to solve an equation. All your precious resources, all your precious metals, and it's stolen from the taxpayers on top of that. So they can have cushy jobs for 30 or 40 years because their parents were monsters, real-life monsters, actual demons. Marshall Islands launches COFA, public review, nuclear legacy questions remain open. You know, what they've done to the Marshall Islands is uncalled for, right? It was just pure evil to go to the Marshall Islands and irradiate this not just the people. I mean, obviously that's the worst, but all these tropical paradises. You got the French Polynesian Islands, you got Christmas Island, you got the Marshall Islands, the atolls, and there's so many out there. This was an unbelievable paradise, an actual paradise as we're talking about. Montebello, Maralinga in Australia. You know, they went there and they blew all of these places and radiated them for 1 billion years. All these tropical paradises. And these were the nurseries of the oceans that they done it on top of that, these beautiful atolls. It's unbelievable, this industry. Its legacy, its damage to humanity and the 8 million species is unparalleled. It's 100% unparalleled. The Bikini Island, for instance, this is a study from 2019, July the 30th, 2019. The radiation is too radioactive to be habitable for over 1 million square kilometers. It's unconscionable what they've done. It's unconscionable. It's unconscionable to be this evil. And because it's never been held accountable, it continues to get worse. It's unconscionable. The Castle Bravo explosion, which was equal to 1,000 Nagasaki's, let me do that again. Sometimes I don't get the right keyword. I smurfed it up. Hang on. Here we go. Looking for that Castle Bravo video. No, I can't find it. I don't know what's going on. I got no idea. You notice how much I hate to give up. One more try. Yeah, I don't see it. It usually shows up every time you search for it. That's okay. Let's move on. Just a little bit surprised, that's all. Oh well, let's keep moving. So Castle Bravo was equal to 1,000 Nagasaki bombs going off at one time. That's a nuclear war. If you set off 1,000 nuclear bombs, is that not a nuclear war? Is the radioactive fallout not the same radioactive fallout? DEMA to test emergency sirens for nuclear stations and distributed potassium iodine tablets. What's the point of iodine tablets? Like really, why would you distribute iodine tablets? The only reason you would distribute iodine tablets is so you can trick people into staying in the danger zone, right? If they give you thyroid or iodine tablets, you should move somewhere else, far away. You're in a danger zone. It's always releasing radiation from the fuel pool. Residents near a nuclear power station get pills. Thyroid safe potassium iodine tablets, 65 milligrams. So the minute you see that show up and they tell you to pick some up or they mail it to you or something like that, you put your house up for sale, get the frig out of there. Because you are breathing in radiation from the fuel pools 24/7. The fuel pools are hemorrhaging radiation into your ecosystem. It doesn't protect the thyroid, right? Because the thyroid can be saturated with any gamma, not just iodine. And it does, right? Cesium, for instance, is going to saturate your thyroid gland too. And it's really, you got to take it, say 48, 72 hours before the accident happens. And then when the accident happens, you still got to run away. So why would you take a chance on it? You can't go back and pick up your precious belongings. They'll tell you to leave your pets behind. The list it's so stupid, and it's a complete disease factory. There's heart problems, liver, lung, respiratory, pituitary, thyroid, adrenaline. When you get older, there's Alzheimer's, dementia, autism, diabetes, Down syndrome, schizophrenia. There's all kinds of illnesses and diseases and autoimmune deficiencies and injuries. Siren activations and emergency alert test system. So they got, I think it's 37 sirens, which is unusual to have that few. Typically 60 to at least 100 or more. The Delaware State Police don't even understand that radiation is dangerous. They're used to give the industry some credibility, right? During the test, which is done to monitor the integrity of the siren system. If you can hear the siren, you shouldn't live there. Sirens will be activated for 3 to 5 minutes. Every dog, every animal, every bird will be drove insane. And if you have an accident, you're never going to use the siren. It's never going to get used. This is a horrific industry. And in the far distance, you guessed it, farms. And it's surrounded by wonderful estuaries. Look at that. Look at all these estuaries. Like if you live near a nuclear plant and they want you to have that in your home or your schools or your businesses or something like that, you need to do the moral and ethical thing. It's difficult, but you need to sell and get out of there. You are in a danger zone. And the fuel pools from these reactors, once they're up and running for a couple of years, and you put fuel in the pool, that's splitting atoms forever. And it doesn't matter if you're within 100 miles, you're still getting brutal doses. The plumes are forever on top of that. They never go away. The free tablet distribution will take place on Thursday, April 4th, at the town. So, like the fire department doesn't understand radiation. And that's who got the biggest doses at Fukushima originally was the fire department. Not the nuclear industries never ever went there. You got to bring a photo ID, like a driver's license, to get something that can help you. And there's confirmation that you're in the danger zone. You're like within 10 miles of a nuclear plant. That's a brutal danger zone. K9 doesn't protect against external radiation. Like, see, if there's iodine, if you're ingesting iodine, you're ingesting uranium, plutonium, americium, neptunium, strontium. This is just a fraction of the stuff you're ingesting. It doesn't travel by itself, neither does tritium, right? In fact, you'll never see a plume of tritium, for instance. Through a program from the U.S. Nuclear Regulatory Commission, they're appointed by the government, see? Administration is. These are, each administration gets a new directors and everything for United Nations. And their job is to destroy your health. That's their job. Nuclear industry is a massive disease factory. That's all it's good for is destroying your health. It has no redeeming qualities whatsoever. If you live outside the 10-mile zone and would like to get useless KI tablets, you can contact your pharmacist. If you live within 50 miles, you need to move away. This is such a sad story. Now, when Buddy moved here, he was healthy. Man blames nuclear meltdown for deformities in the city more radioactive than Chernobyl. Ozek, codenamed City 40, was the birthplace of the Soviet nuclear weapons program. We know it as MAYAC, right? And now it's one of the most contaminated places on the planet with residents exposed to high radiation levels. It's still nowhere near Fukushima. It is bad, don't get me wrong. This is definitely bad. But look at the deformities, my goodness. Incredible deformity, eh? A man living in a secret city, 5 times more radioactive than Chernobyl, has been left with facial deformities he blamed on the huge nuclear meltdowns. Because the Chechnya River, and I don't know what I've done with those studies I had. I had a bunch of studies way back, and the Chechnya River, the studies that I had, was telling whoever read it, there was 7,500 small communities evacuated because of the MAYAC was dumping its radiation directly into the Chechnya River. And so that's a very long river. I think goes all the way to the Black Sea. Which was built in total secrecy around the huge MAYAC nuclear power plant by the Soviets in 1946. And so they had some serious, unbelievable accidents at the MAYAC. And the MAYAC is used to take a lot of the old Soviet Union fuel, and I can't remember. You remember there was this one story where they had this, and they're still trying to, they raise money worldwide, where this site where the Soviet Union would unload their nuclear fuel cores and replace them. And they would store the fuel outdoors in open pools, and that was abandoned for about 25 or 30 years, out in the open. And so a lot of that fuel has been recovered and taken to MIAC to be reprocessed. And MIAC is a military-industrial complex. Is similar to La Hague in France, or Donneray, or Windscale, Sellafield in the United Kingdom, for instance, right? Where they make plutonium mixed oxide fuel, which is weapons-grade fuel for weapons. For the first 8 years after City 40 was built, the residents were forbidden from communicating with the outside world. So they were for 40 years, they weren't allowed to talk to anybody outside. They weren't allowed to travel without special permits. And that would have had to be something extraordinary before they were allowed to leave the city. Prisoners to the nuclear industry. Locals were told they were the nuclear shield and saviors of the world, and everyone on the outside was an enemy. And this guy was healthy when he went there. And he's too poor to leave. And his thyroid glands have swelled and deformed his whole head. They also kept it a secret that the extreme exposure to radiation was affecting the health of the city inhabitants. They started to get sick and die, and the authorities were clandestine about the mortality rates. However, the city's graveyard, with all of its young victims, tell the stories. Because the graveyard is full of these young children that didn't live to be very old. It was nicknamed the Graveyard of the Earth, was surrounded by guarded gates, think about a statement, and barbed wire fences. They don't want anybody walking in there with a Geiger counter, and did not appear on any maps. Its inhabitants' identities were also erased from the Soviet census to guard their secret. And the Mayak nuclear plant went through Russia's biggest nuclear disaster when the facilities allegedly dumped 200 million curies worth of radioactive material into the environment around Ozeks. 200 million curies. And just let me bring up the calculators. So let's say it was cesium, right? So we got 200 million. Dana, got an extra 2. I had to do that. Sorry. So 200 million curies. And you're going to divide that by 120 to get grams of cesium. And that probably comes up with a whole bunch of 6s. To divide that, and that's typical of nuclear equations, isn't it? We get all these 6s. Divide that by 28 to get ounces. Then divide that by 16 to get pounds. 3,720 pounds. And don't get me wrong, that's a revolting amount we're talking about. And you say 2 pounds of plutonium is enough to poison all the species on the entire planet? Each of Fukushima's reactors are around 6 million pounds. So it dwarfs each of Fukushima's reactors dwarfs all nuclear meltdowns combined. The residents also suffered the Keystone disaster in 1957, the worst nuclear disaster the world has seen before Chernobyl, which could have been Chalk River, right? Or could have 1957 was when Windscale melted down too, because Keystone and Windscale melted down pretty close to each other. The worst nuclear disaster by 1957 was the nuclear testing. Every nuclear testing was a nightmare. You know, the Soviet Union's biggest nuclear, the bomba, was equal to 3,800 Nagasaki bombs going off at the one time. So the radioactive fallout this is why we see a complete, once nuclear industry started, that we can trace the decline of all the species into the cancer epidemics, the diabetes epidemics, the major illness and disease epidemics to the nuclear industry. And the species die off. The insect decline, the salmon decline, all the species decline. Radiation bathed the city when a cooling system exploded at Mayak with the force of 100 tons of dynamite. And what they had done was they took a lot of the fuel and they had brought it to a mountaintop where there's no external rivers, right? And because the mountain had its own natural pond. And so they dumped their nuclear fuel rods in the top of a mountain. And of course, when they had a drought, that dried out, and then the dust coming out of there was lethal doses. And that contaminated another 1,000 square miles that is permanently contaminated. One of the nearby lakes had been so heavily contaminated by plutonium from dumping it in there that the locals have renamed it the Lake of Death or Plutonium Lake. And they say if you're on the lake for an hour or close to it for an hour, you'll die that day, right? Try wrapping your mind around that statement. And that, that's going to connect to a lot of water tables. They all do, right? They all connect to each other. So the guys whose neck is painfully swollen from lymph nodes that have grown to triple their normal size, well, it looks like a lot more than triple. His exact diagnosis remains steeped in mystery. His doctor says it can be hard to trace any one condition to radiation. Well, their doctors, obviously. But asked if he had any doubt his symptoms are related to activity, he said, well, when I lived in my home village, I didn't have anything. Everything was great. When I came here, it all started. Imagine living within sight of a lake where if you go there, you'll die within an hour or so. Like if you wrote a book on evil nuclear and the evil stuff that nuclear does and done, there's nothing else on the planet comes close to it. Like literally everything else on the planet combined still doesn't come close to it. 500,000 people in Ozek and its surrounding area said to have been exposed to 5 times as much radiation as those living in areas of Ukraine affected by the Chernobyl. They don't mention Fukushima a single time, eh? Pieces of shit. Most refused to leave because while the Soviet population was suffering from famine and living in extreme poverty, the city was regarded as a paradise as authorities gave them private apartments, plenty of food, good schools and health care, and a plethora of entertainment and cultural activities to make the weapons, right? Residents described it as a town of intellectuals, which is usually the scariest thing you can have, when they are used to getting the best of everything for free, and living in Mayak's nuclear shadow and resigned to her fate. One said, I don't hope for anything anymore. If we get sick, we get sick. And some locals, however, claim that the long-term dumping by the nuclear plant's management continues today, that they're continuing to dump the nuclear waste even today. And one of the nearby lakes is so heavily contaminated with plutonium, the locals have named it the Lake of Death. The Lake of Death. Yeah. Symposium held in Tokyo to mark the 70 years since nuclear tests on the Bikini Atolls. And the Lucky Dragon, do you remember that boat, the Lucky Dragon? Just let me try another search. Maybe I can find Castle Bravo. It's worth a try. Because normally that shows up every single time, right? And so they were they got incredibly sick, and they came back to Japan with a huge catch of tuna that was incredibly radioactive. And they didn't understand radiation back in those days, right? Because it was still highly secretive, right? They didn't know because they didn't see you can't. I guess they seen the explosion, but they didn't comprehend it. The United States conducted the test on the atoll, which is part of the Marshall Islands, 1954. It's insane that, Britain, France, United States, and other countries went out and destroyed all the tropical paradises. All the tropical just a greedy, stupid. It's literally a stupid industry, and the people in it must have competitions to be the stupidest and the evilest they can be. It's just, the whole story is just heartbreaking. Nuclear waste storage should be a concern to everyone in the North. Well, they're talking about the Nuclear Waste Management Organization, Ed Dunhill. I'll show you how evil this industry actually is. Nuclear Waste Management Organization. So what they done was they bought 1,500 acres of farmland in South Brook, 1,500 acres. And so they need 250 acres at the surface, which is a square kilometer. They need 250 acres at the surface for the facilities, because everything comes there is vented the whole way there, and when it gets there, everything is repackaged. This is why they want farmland, right? The remainder will be continued to be used as is today, which is farmland. And so if you're repackaging it and you're buying prime farmland, there's only one reason you would do it. And there's only one reason you want to continue farming the remainder of the 1,500 acres. The 1,250 acres left over, which is 1, 2, 3, 4, that's 5 square kilometers around the facility, is because you want to move the radiation that's falling close by into the supermarkets to poison people. So it's 100% genocide. And then any communities within 100 miles are going to get incredible constant pollution into the... And so over a few years, if the children are playing outdoors, they're going to get sick. And that might not show up for several years, but it's going to show up. And you're going to see autism and Down syndrome studies taking place there right away. And this is going to go on for 100 years. And so they're going to throw all kinds of money because they got $28 billion for 19 years sitting in a bank account. That's growing interest at an absurd amount every year. They're not spending it. And so they're taking that money and bribing the communities. But ultimately the idea is the community votes negative. They'll have a referendum, and the nuclear industry never has referendums. The only time it has referendums is when they're up to something evil. And so they want you to vote no because they don't want a solution. And they will put it in the worst place, surrounded by farms, 7,000 lakes nearby, and the great aquifers not very far away. And then they know the local population ultimately is going to vote no. And that's what they want. Oh, well, all they got to do is go 1,000 miles north into the Canadian Shield, right? The granite rock shield. And there's many places up there where you can build storage facilities. But if you put it in the ground, at some point it's going to melt down because we're talking about fuel rods. Once you leave it alone for a while, it melts down. And if you put it all into one spot, then it's all going to melt down at some point. And we're not talking about 100 years down the road. We're talking about 20, 30, 40 years. You can't put it there and leave it alone. It needs to be dealt with for the rest of your life. And you can't contain it. Everything has to be vented. And everything is vented. And everything they're going to ship there is vented on the highway. When it gets there, everything is repackaged. And that's why they need 250 acres. And that's why they want you to continue, the remainder will continue to be used as is today, which is farmland. So you can move the radiation away. The first ever nuclear summit concludes in Brussels, and there's a flop. It's a massive flop, right? And everybody there from all these little tiny countries, right? That's the only people we've seen there was people from little tiny countries. We didn't see any. Let me check the. Just check the time here. Look, it's hard to appreciate nuclear until you look at the big picture. And there's definitely a big picture. Japan, the nuclear industry, working in tandem with Japan nuclear industry, they're growing food where there's 30 million one-ton bags of radiation. 30 million. It's hemorrhaging all over the planet constantly. We can't contain it. Almost all nuclear power plants are surrounded by farms. Every facet of nuclear you look at screams danger.
Maybe worse than thought. Studies from last year indicate
Fukushima
that radioactive
ocean
water will contaminate
modeled
the entire Pacific Ocean in just 6 years. Kim Min-ji reports.
This graphic shows the gradual contamination of the Pacific Ocean due to leaks of radioactive water from the crippled Fukushima nuclear plant in Japan. The simulation, which was run by a German marine research institute, shows the entire Pacific waters being polluted by radioactive water in just 6 years.
So within 6 years, they said it'll contaminate the entire Pacific Ocean. Well, the only problem was a little frog in my throat there. What the hell? This is just a few days of radioactive fallout. This is 9 days of radioactive fallout. And this is basically 10 million atoms of cesium-137. Cesium pulses energy 600 feet or so every second. So it gives full body x-rays, for starters, to everything in the forest and the ecosystem and the meadows and everywhere else. And because there's so much of it falls out. So like the West Coast was hit 220 million atoms. This was a Canadian Ottawa study. 200 million atoms per liter of iodide-129 after Fukushima, with a 15 million year half-life. That's the death of a planet right there on its own. It takes quite a few decades to play out if that was the only thing that came out, but ultimately it'll kill all the species and humans. It'll destroy the genetics too, the DNA, the chromosomes, the cells of all the species, because it'll saturate the body and the thyroid and the bones. And so for the children, you got mutated stem cells and mutated hormones that are prolific. It's perpetual, and it never goes away. And the plume that covered the planet, iodide-129, wasn't just iodide-129, but these kind of numbers, because iodide-129 doesn't pulse energy very far, but it pulses it almost at the speed of light for 15 million years. And so when it's in your body, that kind of iodine will aggregate also in your thyroid gland, but it'll go everywhere else. It'll sequester in your muscles, your organs, and your bones. And it's pulsing energy almost at the speed of light. Like It's hard to comprehend that these are like little explosions going off in your DNA and your chromosomes and your cells every second. There's so much of it that it sterilized all the insect species, and it does it in increments over a little period of time, a decade or two. But all of a sudden, you don't have to clean your windshields anymore, for instance. So we had all this information. Of course, they come out like every facet of nuclear screams monster. They come out and showed you that map, and if you go look up Pacific Ocean, Fukushima, you'll find endless pictures of that one over there, which was the tsunami. And they even they set up websites and they put out the picture and look at the radiation, and everybody in the comment would be, oh my God, it's terrible. And when you get lots of comments there, then the trolls come back in there and say, hey, stupid, that's a tsunami map, right? And demoralize them. But that was Noah's model of the tsunami. This was Noah's model of the radiation dispersion in the ocean. But the idea was to drag you away from the airborne dispersion. And so you got 80 years of radioactive fallout making plumes like this that never go away. And it's pulsing energy at the speed of light. So carbon from gas, oil, and coal, it grows trees and plants and insects and forests and meadows and humans and everything else. You can't puppies, you name it. You can't have any of it. You can't. If we got no carbon, we look just like the moon. Right? And it's just a mind game. They're playing with you. But the radiation pulses energy at the speed of light. It's pure energy. Energy never goes away according to science. And so when you saturate the entire ecosystem, the biosphere, the oceans, with anthropogenic man-made radiation pulsing energy at the speed of light every second, you're on your way to an extinction event. See? So we launched research expeditions, and we done the entire coastline, and what we discovered is terrifying. And we done it year after year. Once we realized what we discovered, once we realized the species were exterminated, to your left, highly visible species too, were now exterminated. We had to go back year after year, no matter what, at all costs. We had to go back to see if the species recovered, started to try to recover. And after the first year, it was really obvious they didn't recover. But the way the studies work is you got to repeat this for several years. So I should have only done, say, 3 more years. Like an idiot, I've done 6 years total. And I'm paying for it today. My health is destroyed. And you can trace that damage back to Fukushima and the research expeditions. So the highly visible species to your left are now exterminated. So it's hard to conceive it, right? And this is why you have millions of Cassini auklets, millions of common murres, millions of species, the keystone species, missing, that migratory species are missing. So like the birds would normally land on the coastline over there, low tide, if they couldn't, because you got to lay your eggs somewhere, right? And you need a food source close by. And there was 480 species of worms in the ocean, in the tidal zones. There was hundreds of them. There was the shellfish, there was the clams, the clams like the little nexmanillas, the razorback clams, you had gooey ducks, you had oysters, you had mussels, you had snails and periwinkles, you had this incredible diversity just of shellfish. You had 84 or 78 species of starfish. Each species came in multiple vibrant colors. You had 76 or so species of sea anemones, and each species came in multiple vibrant colors. You had around 76, 77 species of sponges. Each species came in multiple vibrant colors. You had this incredible diversity. You had 700 algae, and inside the 700 algae, now there's only 1 or 2, right? The kelp weed and kelp cabbage. And normally with the 700 algae, there was identified 5,500 invertebrates without the backbones, or like little shrimp. That were separate species. That was identified by the universities and studies of the coastline. There's many more there not identified. There's many, many microclimates up there too, right? You had this 7,000 highly visible species, and now you have nothing. Now, if you shipwreck there, you will starve to death. You 100% will starve to death. The species now are exterminated. And that's the direct cause of radioactive fallout. This is just 19 days of radioactive fallout. And remember, this is going on for 80 years, and that's why we have global warming. Suggesting that carbon is somehow going to warm the planet up is just a garbage can diagnosis, and it's on purpose. You had plumes that covered the planet, and all the studies from all the countries, typically around 20 to 30 days. The consensus was, this one's 19.5 days, this is 25 days. All the studies are telling you the same thing, right? The plumes covered the planet. This is the Neptunium-239 dispersal, which decays to plutonium, of course, covers the planet. You have the cesium studies at 1 million and 10 million atoms per cubic meter of air from the French government. And cesium's not slow either, it's quick acting. At 1 million, 10 million atoms of cesium-137 per liter. Radiation levels on the US West Coast spiked to 1 million times normal. That was the French government. And this model here is only 9 days. That's the 18th, rather 7 days after the tsunami. 2 days after the last reactor detonated. You got to wake up. You got to make a stand. This is Earth's last stand. You can't ignore this. You can't pretend. You can't wish this away. It's not going away. We got to deal with it. We got to come up with solutions so the future generation, so there can be a future generation. This model is based on 20 days of radioactive fallout. One of my biggest fears, we'll discover a planet and we'll put nuclear on it. That'll be the end of that planet. We'll discover a planet with 8 million species like Earth, and then we'll put nuclear there and ultimately destroy it within a number of decades. Why is every nuclear power plant surrounded by farms when they have endless studies saying don't do something like that? Because the farms will suck up the food. And the child's risk of cancer. So if the child is eating the food, just 11 atoms per kilogram, you put 200 million atoms on the head of a needle and you can't see it or perceive it. So how are you going to figure out there's 11 there? And you can't filter them out because it's atoms, right? So look at all the farms. Why is almost every nuclear power plant surrounded by farms? Does anybody really believe that's an accident? Why are all the nuclear mixed oxide fuel weapons sites surrounded by farms? Columbia medical professor in Highland, just one hot particle can cause a cancer. These reactors, fuel pools, and the older they are, the more reactors they got in the fuel pools, no containment. The reactors are all splitting atoms, the atoms are all falling out, and this is why they're surrounded by farms. And the studies show that they know better. Right? Putting nuclear plants in farmland is clearly the stupidest thing you could ever conceive, unless you're trying to destroy the humanity. 50 atoms a kilogram in adults lead to irreversible lesions in the vital organ, goodbye immune system. And it ain't going to get any better down the road. 100 becquerels is cesium is nuclear waste before Fukushima. After, it's safe to eat, but 50 a kilogram is permanent damage to your organs. Irreversible lesions. Irreversible. Why is every nuclear power plant surrounded by farm when every study says, no, please, goodness, don't do that? Because this industry hates you. It's exterminating you. It's exterminating you. Smalling mascot asked Fukushima kids to gargle to stay safe from radiation. Radioactive sparkles on happy children. So smiling can't keep you safe from radioactive fallout. Living within 100 miles of a nuclear power plant, there's no way you're not going to get sick and destroy your children's health. There's no way. There's zero possibility you're not going to destroy all of their potential. You're not going to take away all of their future by having to live within 100 miles of a nuclear power plant. And eating food from areas like Japan or within 100 miles of a nuclear power plant is a guaranteed easy way to get sick. Look, I show so much evidence, and then the world just sits there like we don't even exist here, right? And the people that are sent from me their job is to destroy humanity and the 8 million species, not sent from me. Because that's what they're doing ultimately, right? Imagine what kind of stupid moron you got to be to take the job to censor me. What kind of moron you actually got to be. Oh, you got lots of money, you got your family, thinks you're special, but you're a moron, right? To censor someone like me. You're literally a moron if you censor me. You're just stupid. You're literally stupid if that's the job you got. Translocation of all kinds of isotopes to edible plants. So why, why would you surround nuclear power plants with farms? Why would you build nuclear power plants in prime farmland when the radioactive fallout is guaranteed to assimilate into the food? And they have endless studies to show that is fact. Why would you do that? And why would you do that everywhere worldwide? Why so evil? Why do you hate us so much? And now you're out there, the nuclear industry out there saying they're the savior for climate change. Because if it's evil, then they're very interested in doing it. That's what we're seeing with them. They're only interested if it's evil. If it's yeah, let's do that. That's pretty evil. Yeah, okay, let's do that. Well, let's build a nuclear power plant. Where's all the farms to? They need water. Okay, well, build it right there. Well, it's not a very good spot. No. Build it right there. We'll solve all your problems. Don't worry about it. Because that's what the industry's been doing this entire legacy. Generation after generation of engineers, when they design a nuclear power plant, the first spot they're going to look for is, well, where's the farmland to? They're going to build a nuclear dump. Well, where's the farmland to? They're going to build a nuclear weapons facility. Well, where's the farmland to? Let's build it there. And that's what they do. And people can pretend I'm not right, but that's all you're fucking doing. You're pretending. You're delusional if you think that I'm wrong. You're not being realistic. Like this is their typical. They just hate us. They hate us. They hate the 8 million species. They hate the insects. They hate fungus. They hate bacteria. Otherwise, you wouldn't build nuclear like this. You wouldn't do this. And in order to have a nuclear job, you got to buy into this. In order to be the best paid nuclear, you got to buy into that. In order to get your nuclear degrees, like Stinkfoot, people like that, you got to buy into this. You got to trade off a paycheck. When you can get it, if you're smart enough to get a degree in that, you're smart enough to get a degree, do something decent. You don't need a degree in this. You're picked for this job because you're a moron, and it's easy to corrupt you, and that's why you got the job. It's because you're missing half your brain, common sense. That's why you took the job, and that's why you got offered the job. There's no need to be evil. It's just there's no reason to be evil. So like when you the industry is corrupted your universities 100%. Your media is 100% corrupted, particularly with the nuclear industry. When you got the media, BBC, ABC Australia, Cecilia Vega, CNN anchor in, you got BBC Rupert Winfield Hayes, CBS Seth Dorn, which is a senator's son, pretending they're in a fuel pool of a building that doesn't even exist. How do you reconcile that, see? And people talk about fake news. Well, this is the best of the best example of fake news. Tell me another example that's better than that. There's simply not. There is no better example of fake news than that example right there. Media pretending they're in a building that doesn't even exist. Like, how do you beat me on that, see? How does that actually work? Oh, no, that's normal. Being evil is normal. And Stinkfoot, TEPCO, the Japanese government, hired Stinkfoot to go after me. So he flew down apparently to Japan according to Calm Down Charlie. And that's what we see so many of these people, and they come across as nice. Stinkfoot comes across normally as a nice guy. Like if he's not being a piece of shit, which is rarely. If he's just doing a typical video, he comes across as a pretty nice guy. He's a nuclear scientist. He's a nuclear engineer, I think. He's unbelievably smart, but 100 times evil. There's not an example out there of him being good. It's always being a piece of shit. So think about them pretending that they're in the fuel pool of the building to the left that doesn't exist, was 150 feet above the stump to your left.
Where I'm standing is on top of what used to be reactor building number 4. The whole of this building was blown apart by a huge explosion.
We are here inside Reactor 4 at the Fukushima Daiichi nuclear power plant that was severely crippled during the earthquake and tsunami of 2011.
Of the decommissioning work taking place here in Reactor 4.
At the end of our tour, we were checked for radiation exposure. In 4 hours, I received the equivalent of less than a chest x-ray.
1,600 highly radioactive fuel rods inside this pool. They've got to move them outside of this reactor.
Where I'm standing is on top of what used to be reactor building number 4. The whole of this building was blown apart by a huge explosion.
We are here inside Reactor 4 at the Fukushima Daiichi nuclear power plant that was...
So, think about what they're doing there. In order for CBS, for BBC, for ABC, which are the 3 biggest in Australia, United Kingdom, and America, CNN is a worldwide media, by the way, which is a military media, obviously, but they're worldwide too. And for that to work, you got to make sure no other media calls you out. No other media comes out and shows the picture to the left and say, look, they're lying. Because that's all it takes, right? Greenpeace, all Greenpeace got to do is come out and show that picture now. And Greenpeace has this picture. I tweeted to every Greenpeace. Greenpeace Canada, Greenpeace United Kingdom, Greenpeace USA, Greenpeace Australia, Greenpeace everybody. And they all blocked me and took down the picture. Every one of them. So what does that mean, see? Before it worked, there can't be any opposition. Here's all the media. They're not doing it because they're not being cautious. They're being blatant scum. Because they know there's no media and there's no university that's going to challenge them. There's no one going to challenge them. There's no nuclear engineers. There's no nuclear fusion scientists. There's no nuclear academics, no nuclear alumni are going to come out and say, hey, look, they're not in the building, folks. There's not one. There's not one. So when I put that picture together, that video together, for instance, I said, I got him. I can't wait. And that night I played it and I thought for sure that'll be the downfall now. Because how's that for fake news? Like, woohoo, pretending you're in a building that don't exist at a nuclear meltdown. How is that not like, mass sent out into the environment? How come there's not 600 people had already reposted that all over the internet? How is that possible? I was talking about fake friggin' news, right? But how is it possible that doesn't exist? How is that possible? Unless they control the media and the universities. Because that's the only way it's going to happen. And they had to have 100% confidence too. There cannot be no dissenting voices for that to work. That can't work. That'll bring down the whole fucking stupid industry, see? And so when we do, the people here that are here regularly and the people that support what I'm doing here, knows right in the bottom of their heart that I'm right. And that I don't lie, and I don't make stuff up, and I don't misrepresent anything. And I provide the documentations for all my assertions, which is the most labor-intensive forensic investigative journalism we see currently on this planet. And while I'm not trained to be a forensic investigative journalist, I am self-trained, obviously. And so the topics, because a forensic investigative journalist doesn't cover every single topic on the planet, neither do I. And they specialize in a few topics, and so do I. And I don't know how else to describe what we're doing here without calling it forensic investigative journalism. It's because that's what it is. And we're the only spot on the planet that can't be compromised. Because you can't buy me out. Because I hate the nuclear industry so much. There's not enough money to take away the fun I get doing this every day. There's nothing makes me happier than kicking the shit of the nuclear industry on a regular basis. Because that's got to get done. Somebody has to start it, right? And who better than someone like me anyway? My personality's perfect. Because I got some real hate going on here for the nuclear industry. And I got no problems calling it like it is. I got no problem providing the documentation. And there is a problem. It's work. It's a ridiculous amount of work. It's a ridiculous amount of work. The Model Piranha is based on 30 days of radioactive fallout. So think of a snowstorm that after about 20 days, the snow covers the entire planet. The snow never melts. The snow never goes away. And the snow never stops coming out from its source. And just because the whole planet is covered don't mean it stopped coming out. You just can't see it anymore because the whole planet is covered in a snowstorm, right? But flip and call it radiation, and that's what 1,000 fuel pools are doing to you every day. It's an invisible snowstorm that never goes away and it never stops. And there's another new snowstorm going to cover the entire planet again tomorrow, and another one the day after, and it's going to go on. It's been going on for 80 years. It's been going on. With all the nuclear weapons bombed, we're doing the same thing. Every nuclear fuel pool does exactly that right there. This model is only based on venting from one reactor building. So a fuel pool is much more inventories each day than the venting that they alleged had happened. By the way, you couldn't vent. You couldn't vent from a nuclear meltdown. Once the buildings blew up, you can't vent anything from that. Everything was vented right away. And there wasn't an academic on the entire planet in the nuclear industry that looked at that and said the fuel pools and the reactor cores were intact. Not one. And not one of them spoke up on the entire planet. That's some serious evil right there, folks. That's coordinated evil. That's a coordinated attack upon humanity. They are gone to war against humanity and the 8 million species. And just because they don't fly jets and they don't fire bombs, it's 100% worse because it attacks every species with replicating cells equally enthusiastic. So when you see the media 80 years telling you it's like a banana and walking in the sunshine and flying on an airplane and going in and pretending they're in a building that doesn't even exist, that should that should terrify you. That should horrify you that is able to happen. And that when professors of nuclear and quantum engineering are out there telling you it's like throwing 3 grams of sugar into the ocean from 4 nuclear meltdowns and 8 missing fuel pools, and you don't correct that, that needs to be corrected. How the fuck is that acceptable? How is it acceptable? So, like growing food in a nuclear wasteland, surrounded by nuclear wastelands, where there's 30 million one-ton bags of radiation, and they're growing right alongside of one-ton bags of radiation within sight of multiple nuclear meltdowns and 8 missing detonated fuel pools. If that's not insanity, what actually is? Because each of these prefectures to your left produce about a billion pounds of food each year. And Japan is shipping that all over the world. Canada removed all restrictions after 93 days. The nuclear industry time is come and gone, and the world needs to make a stand. This is Earth's last stand. You're going to have to make a stand. Like it or lump it, you're going to have to make a stand. That's the moral and ethical thing to do, and you got nothing to lose anymore. You got nothing to lose anymore. And so why not hold them accountable? You can't let them continue doing it. We can't let them continue to do what they're doing. Has TEPCO been established to be perpetually evil and corrupt? Somebody accidentally said no. They must have sneezed or something, I guess, when they were going to take the poll. But it's clear that TEPCO is perpetually evil and corrupt. It's not maybe, it's not almost, it's not going to be. It's perpetually corrupt. And that is a threat to everything we covet. And that is not sustainable. That is not tenable. And we have no right to sit in silence, because this is our watch, it's our responsibility, we're obligated, it's our obligation. It's our obligation. These are felons, these are thieves, these are fraudsters, call them whatever you want, bandits or gangsters, or I don't care what you call them, right? These are not desperados, these are terrorists. Like giving you potassium pills and saying that's going to help you, that's loathsome, that's immoral, that's nefarious, it's indefensible, it's inexcusable, it's unforgivable, and it's intolerable. It's embarrassing, it's humiliating, it's degrading. It's an egregious that the police don't hold these people accountable. Because their children are just as vulnerable as ours. Their loved ones themselves are just as vulnerable as anybody else. Everything with replicating cells has no autoimmune trigger to defend against this wicked, evil, hideous. These are terrorists. The only way to describe nuclear industry is as terrorists. Okay, well, we're close. I got 3 minutes to go, and we're at the 2-hour mark. So, the show was over last night. I still got to kill 2 minutes, so hang on. The show was over last night. Because I don't get no views. Like everybody else, if they got 100 people on the show, they get 70 views when the show is over. I get next to none. I get maybe 10. If they're asleep at the switch, I'll get 10. I don't know how many I had last night. I think it was 11 last night or something. I think they went easy on me. No, I don't know. I think I must be insane. I had 8 views after my show last night. 8 views. So nobody's going to watch the video. I only got 8 views. You probably won't even show up, but let's still say 0, right? But this story is so important. You can't have a future without the facts. And you ain't going to get the facts from these monsters, these traitors. Everybody should take a screen capture of that and should mail it to somebody, anybody. And tell them, why are they pretending they're in reactor 4 150 feet above the stump to your left? Because that's a question everybody's going to ask themselves at some point. And then mail them that to them. Why are they growing food in a nuclear wasteland where the food was banned by 55 countries for a decade? How are you going to filter water at 2.2 sieverts per liter? Like the questions, the important questions, questions that are simple. 11:59. Still got another minute to kill. Well, we'll call it a night. Have a great night, great day tomorrow. Hugs for everybody. We'll see everybody on the other side.